This is Into Math 3rd grade, lesson 15.4. Use reasoning strategies to compare fractions. I can use different reasoning strategies to compare fractions. Please gather your workbook and a pencil and turn to page 414. We will begin under Build Understanding, Part 1. You can pause this video at any time as needed. Ian's granola bar recipe calls for 2/3 cup of oats. Sadie's recipe uses 3/4 cup of oats. Whose recipe uses fewer oats? Show how to compare 2/3 and 3/4. The first thing we're going to do is review our information. We see that Ian has 2/3 and Sadie's recipe uses 3/4. So we are going to create this on our fraction strips in the green rectangle. First, we will start with Ian's. We know that Ian's recipe calls for 2/3. So we will take a look at the denominator, which is 3, and we will cut Ian's fraction strip into 3 equal parts. Each of these parts is one of the 3 parts. Now we will look at the numerator for Ian's recipe, and that is 2. So we will fill in 1, 2 of the 3 parts. So here is Ian's fraction strip of 2/3. Now we will take a look at Sadie's recipe, and her recipe calls for 3/4 cup. So we will take a look at the denominator, and we see that her recipe calls for 3/4, so we will cut the fraction strip into 4 parts, and each part will be 1/4. Then we will take a look at the numerator, which is 3, and we will fill in 3 of these 1/4 because that is what the recipe calls for. It calls for 3/4 cup. Okay, now we can take a look at Part A. Part A asks, what fractions represent the missing piece of each whole? So remember, a whole means complete. If we were to fill in the rest of Ian's fraction strip, we would need to fill in this, the 1/3. If we wanted to fill in the rest of Sadie's, we would need to fill in the 1/4. So we can write what's missing is 1/3, that would be for Ian's, and 1/4 for Sadie. Now let's look at Part B. Do the missing pieces have the same numerator or the same denominator? When we take a look at 1/3 and 1/4, we notice that they have the same numerator, which is 1. Part C asks, how can you use the size of the missing pieces to compare 2/3 and 3/4? Remember that the missing pieces are these numbers here, 1/3 and 1/4. Those are our missing pieces. So what are you noticing about those numbers? You may want to pause the video and have some think time and come back. When you come back, you will notice that since the numerators of the missing pieces are the same, which we said was 1, that's highlighted in yellow, I can look at the denominator, which is highlighted in green, for the size of the missing pieces. When I do that, I see that Ian's recipe has the larger piece missing, so it's the lesser fraction. And we also see that up top here. Again, Ian's piece here is larger to completing the whole, so we know that his recipe is definitely the lesser fraction. So we can answer Part D. Whose recipe uses fewer oats? We would say Ian's recipe. Let's take a look at the next page, page 415, under Step It Out, number 2. Beth's glass of orange juice is 3/8 full. Leo's glass is 3/4 full. Both glasses hold the same amount. Whose glass has more juice? Choose a strategy to compare the fractions. Let's take a look at each strategy. The first one says same denominator. The fraction with the greatest numerator is greater. Let's take a look at the next strategy, same numerator. The fraction with the smaller denominator is greater. Now let's look at missing pieces. The fraction with the smaller missing piece is greater. Okay, let's go back to our problem. We know that Beth's glass of orange juice is 3/8 full. We also know that Leo's glass is 3/4 full. So these are our two fractions. Let's take a look at the same denominator strategy. I'm showing the denominator is 8 and 4. So this strategy would not work because they do not have the same denominator. Let's take a look at the next strategy. The same numerator. We see that they do have the same numerator. So this would be a good strategy for us to use. The fraction with the smaller denominator is greater. Well, we would see that the smaller denominator would be 4 compared to this denominator of 8. So that would mean this fraction would be the bigger one, 3/4, if we use the same numerator strategy. So we can answer that we would use the same numerator strategy. The denominators in this case are not the same, but the numerators are the same. So the same numerator strategy works the best. Let's take a look at part B. Which fraction is greater? And whose glass has more juice? Explain your answer. We have already worked this through, knowing that 3/4 is the greater fraction because we used this strategy. When the fraction has the same numerator, which in this case is 3, then we take a look at the denominator. And the denominator, the one with the smaller denominator, is going to be the greater one. And we know that 4 is smaller than 8. So we can answer that 3/4 is greater. Leo's glass is greater because the numerators in these two are the same. So we compared the size of the equal parts, which is the denominator. And because we know that the smaller denominator is greater, the fourths are larger than eighths, so the 3/4 is greater than 3/8. As always, you are welcome to go back and rewatch this video, and you can pause along the way at any time as needed.